The flight crew and the passengers describe him as an unremarkable guy. He's a Caucasian male, he's got on a dark suit, black tie, carrying a briefcase.
On November 24th, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving, a quiet, well-dressed man boarded a commercial airplane in Portland, Oregon. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. He ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette. And then he calmly handed the flight attendant a note that read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary." What followed was the only unsolved act of air piracy in United States history. A man demanded and received $200,000 in cash. He demanded parachutes, and somewhere over the dense, freezing forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the middle of the night, in a thunderstorm, he jumped out of the back of the plane. He was never seen again. No body was ever found. No definitive trace of the man was ever recovered. The FBI investigated for 45 years, their longest-running case in history, and officially closed it in 2016, unsolved. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the only hijacker in American history who simply vanished into thin air with the money and was never caught. Section 1. The man who boarded Flight 305. It was the day before Thanksgiving, 1971. Historically, one of the busiest travel days of the year, though this particular flight was nearly empty. A man approached the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter at Portland International Airport. He paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. Witnesses later described him consistently. A man in his mid-40s, about 6 feet tall, with dark hair and dark eyes. He wore a dark business suit, a white shirt, a black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and a raincoat. He carried a briefcase and an attaché bag. He looked, in every way, like an ordinary businessman flying home for the holiday. He boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305, a Boeing 727, and took a seat near the back of the plane, seat 18C, in the last row. The flight had only about 36 passengers on board. He ordered a bourbon and soda from flight attendant Florence Schaffner and lit a cigarette, behaving completely normally. Shortly after takeoff, he passed Florence a folded note. She assumed, as flight attendants often did from businessmen at the time, that it was a phone number, a casual flirtation. She slipped it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned toward her and said quietly, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Section 2. The Hijacking. Florence opened the note. It read in neat handwriting, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." She did exactly as instructed and sat beside him. He calmly opened his briefcase just enough for her to see the contents. A tangle of wires, a battery, and several red cylindrical sticks that appeared to be dynamite. Then he closed it. His demands were specific and oddly precise. $200,000 in negotiable American currency. He was careful to specify this exact phrasing: 4 parachutes, 2 primary, and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon landing. Florence relayed the demands to the cockpit. The pilot, William Scott, informed air traffic control. Northwest Orient Airlines President Donald Neerop personally authorized the ransom payment, the equivalent of well over $1 million today, and ordered the money assembled immediately from Seattle area banks. The bills were marked with serial numbers and photographed before being loaded into a bag, a precaution that would later prove absolutely critical to the case. The plane circled above Puget Sound for nearly 2 hours while the money and parachutes were prepared on the ground. Passengers were told only that there was a minor mechanical problem. None of them knew a hijacking was unfolding just rows away. Cooper remained calm throughout, drinking his bourbon, occasionally chatting politely with Florence about the Seattle area. At 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Cooper insisted the plane taxi to a remote, well-lit part of the tarmac, away from the terminal, so police could not approach unseen. A single airline employee delivered the money and parachutes to the aircraft. Cooper then did something that struck investigators as remarkably civil for a hijacker. He released all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants completely unharmed. He kept only the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, aboard. He told them their new destination, Mexico City, and he gave a list of highly specific flight instructions. Fly low, under 10,000 feet, with the rear staircase of the aircraft lowered, and a minimum speed. Section 3. The jump at 7:40 p.m., the Boeing 727 took off again from Seattle, now bound for Mexico City with a planned refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. The night was dark, cold, and filled with a violent rainstorm. Cooper instructed the remaining crew to stay in the cockpit and not come out for any reason. He asked Tina Mucklow, the last flight attendant remaining with him, how to operate the aft stairway, the staircase built into the tail of the Boeing 727 that could be lowered mid-flight. She explained the mechanism. He then told her to go to the cockpit and not come back. She did. At approximately 8 p.m., a warning light illuminated in the cockpit, indicating that the aft stairway had been opened mid-flight. The crew, following his explicit instructions, did not investigate. The plane continued through the storm. At 8:13 p.m., the crew felt a sudden, sharp change in air pressure and a noticeable bump in the aircraft, consistent with a person jumping from the rear stairway. When the plane landed safely in Reno a short time later, the cockpit crew cautiously made their way back. The cabin was empty. Dan Cooper was gone. He had jumped from the aircraft somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington state in pitch darkness, in a thunderstorm, at an altitude of around 10,000 feet, wearing only a business suit, a raincoat, and a parachute, with $200,000 in cash strapped to his body. He left behind his black tie, his tie clip, and 8 cigarette butts. He took everything else with him. No one has ever confirmed seeing him again. Section 4. The largest manhunt in FBI history. The FBI launched what would become known internally as NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking, one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in the Bureau's history. Investigators calculated the most probable drop zone based on the plane's speed, altitude, and flight path. A rugged, heavily forested, mountainous area near Ariel, Washington, close to the Lewis River. Hundreds of FBI agents, military personnel, and local volunteers searched the area on foot, by helicopter, and later by tracking dogs. They searched for weeks. They found nothing. No parachute, no briefcase, no bomb components, no money, no body, nothing. The terrain made the search incredibly difficult. Dense, old-growth forest, steep ravines, freezing temperatures, and in the years following, speculation grew that Cooper may not have survived the jump at all. Experts pointed out that he jumped at night, in a storm, into unfamiliar wilderness, wearing inadequate clothing and using a parachute that was not configured for a free-fall jump of this kind. One of the 4 parachutes provided was notably a non-functional training parachute, sewn shut for classroom demonstration purposes. If Cooper had grabbed that one by mistake, his fate would have been sealed instantly. In the years that followed, the FBI interviewed and investigated literally hundreds of suspects. Composite sketches were circulated nationwide. The case became a sensation, and oddly, something of a folk legend. Cooper, despite committing a serious federal crime and endangering dozens of lives, became something close to a folk hero in parts of the Pacific Northwest. The town of Ariel, Washington, still holds an annual D.B. Cooper Days celebration to this day. And then, in 1980, came the single biggest break in the entire case. Section 5, The Money Resurfaces. On February 10, 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on a family picnic along the banks of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, roughly 20 miles from the calculated drop zone. While raking the sandy riverbank, he uncovered 3 decaying, partially disintegrated bundles of cash and still held together by rubber bands. FBI forensic teams confirmed the bills were genuine, and the serial numbers matched exactly with the ransom money given to Cooper nearly 9 years earlier. It was the only physical trace of the ransom ever found. This discovery reignited the case and produced new theories. Some experts argued the location of the money, found along a riverbank, weathered by years of water exposure, suggested Cooper had not survived the jump, and that his body, or his remains, had been carried downstream by the Columbia River system over the years, eventually depositing the cash separately from his remains. Other investigators disagreed, arguing the money could have been buried or hidden by Cooper himself near the river, separate from wherever he ultimately ended up, alive or dead. The discovery answered one question and raised a dozen new ones. It proved Cooper truly had jumped with the real money, but it brought investigators no closer to learning his identity or his fate. Section 6. The Suspects. Over the decades, the FBI formally investigated more than 800 suspects. A handful rose to prominence in public theories. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. carried out a strikingly similar hijacking just 5 months after Cooper's, demanding cash and parachutes and jumping from a plane. He was caught, convicted, and later killed in a shootout after escaping prison. Some investigators noted strong physical similarities to Cooper's description, though McCoy had a confirmed, verifiable alibi placing him elsewhere on the night of the Cooper hijacking, and his family has always denied any connection. Kenneth Christensen was a former paratrooper and Northwest Orient Airlines employee. After his death in 1994, his family reported a deathbed statement in which he seemingly hinted at a secret involving the hijacking. He matched the physical description closely and had relevant parachuting experience. However, no direct physical evidence has ever linked him conclusively to the case. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran with extensive parachute and demolitions training, was investigated multiple times across several decades. A team of independent researchers and former law enforcement officials published a detailed case in 2018 arguing Rackstraw was Cooper, citing a coded message they believed he sent to newspapers in 1971. Rackstraw denied this until his death in 2019, and the FBI never charged him. In July 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially announced it was suspending active investigation into the case, citing the need to redirect resources to more pressing priorities. The case remains technically open, but no agents are actively assigned to it. D.B. Cooper, a name that, notably, was a media error. The hijacker's alias was Dan Cooper, but a wire service reporter mistakenly reported it as DB, and the incorrect name stuck permanently in public memory remains the only unidentified, uncaptured hijacker in American aviation history. Somewhere in the rugged wilderness of southwestern Washington, the truth about Dan Cooper may still be waiting, buried under decades of fallen leaves, scattered by river currents, or perhaps, just perhaps, carried quietly by a man who lived out the rest of his life under a different name, telling no one what he had done. Did he survive that jump? Did he build a quiet, ordinary life somewhere with $200,000 he could never fully explain? Or did the storm, the cold, and the wilderness claim him within minutes of leaving that aircraft, his remains scattered across a landscape too vast and too remote to ever search completely? We may never know. What we do know is this. On one stormy November night in 1971, an ordinary-looking man in a business suit did something no one before or since has ever managed to do in the history of American aviation, and he simply vanished. So I want to know what you think. Did D.B. Cooper survive? Was he one of the suspects we just covered, or someone history has completely overlooked? Drop your theory in the comments below. I read every single one. If you love deep dive mysteries like this, make sure you're subscribed to Eternal Secrets HQ, because we are just getting started uncovering the cases the world has never solved. Stay curious, stay questioning. I'll see you in the next one.